Today is going to be a really interesting one. We're going to be looking at a subject which I don't think is explored nearly enough. We often talk about what autism looks like in children or young adults, but hardly ever do we look at it from midlife onwards. Whether or not this means you were diagnosed before and just how it changes chemically and how it looks different in older people, or if you're diagnosed from mid-age onwards. On that, from exceptional individuals. And today we are going to be joined by a very special guest, Yosoda, who works with our mentoring and coaching. We are going to be learning about autism in 40 plus. What happens when you go from midlife onwards? What does it look like? How is it different, social and also biologically? So yeah, over to you.
I'm going to do some of the talking, like what your experiences have been. I think the group here will benefit from you guys sharing your own experiences as well. We're going to talk about what happens when you turn 40. We're also going to talk about why it's more difficult to diagnose girls or women. What was it like before your diagnosis? What made you want to get a diagnosis and what happened after? First question, what decade were you born in? Okay, lots of 70s and 80s. I'm going to share with you about what happens when you turn 40. There's the male and female aging and menopause sort of symptoms. As we go on talking about menopause or andropause, you will find that it is quite different for neurotypical versus neurodiverse individuals. If you have any of the symptoms, you don't have to be 40. You might start feeling perimenopausal or periandropause as early as mid-30s. Just like to see if anybody has.
I know for myself, I picked lack of focus and motivation. I think some of these things just go hand in hand being neurodiverse. Audra says, I had a total hysterectomy this year, so I'm full on in surgical menopause and is not working well.
Thank you. Yeah, generally with the women, you'll have the irregular menstrual periods, and with men, generally the decreased energy and lack of focus is quite common. When you were pre-menopausal or even menopausal, did you find that your autistic symptoms were heightened?
Did you find it more difficult to do certain social interactions? Was it more subtler or more enhanced almost?
It's quite divided. Just trying to get a feel of anything else that you felt that changed when you turned 40. High anxiety, ease with myself, yeah. Yes, the weight gain is a big one. Alcohol. Okay.
A lot of changes, giving up alcohol, feeling more at ease with yourself. Then there's also putting on weight faster, which is perfectly normal at that age. But interesting, some of you have had higher anxiety. I guess from what you were saying, Yusoda, about the changes that happened at the time, particularly relating to autism, not surprising.
Anxiety, weight gain are all typical menopausal symptoms, but generally, if you're neurodiverse, they tend to be more enhanced, especially if you've got sensory issues that can be heightened as well. Endometriosis. The anxiety and depression one is quite big. Thank you guys for sharing. I'm just going to move on and just want to talk about why boys are diagnosed 4 times more often than girls. Obviously, we all have talked about diagnostic bias before in our previous presentations, previous webinars. There's also some new research coming up with talks about something called a female protective effect. I'll just go into that briefly and I'll share my sources with you at the end of the presentation. Generally, females are more resistant to mutations linked to autism. One of the examples is the chromosome that's identified that causes autism. Girls have a protein called ERK that can compensate for that deletion. Therefore, it is resistant to the mutation. Girls generally are better at compensating behaviorally as well. That leads to why they are not diagnosed as much. Girls can carry the same mutation as boys, do not have the condition. They could be carriers of the mutation and potentially their kids might have autism. Just some preliminary research findings again with menopause linked with autism. Like you guys said and shared with me just now, that you just have heightened social, emotional, sensory difficulties. Sometimes not having the information to navigate menopause just generally means you don't get the necessary support. Being menopausal diverse, hard to differentiate which is which, not having the right words. The symptoms are quite different from someone who's neurotypical. Again, because GP's knowledge generally in menopause and then obviously with neurodiversity thrown into the mix, people feel they didn't get enough support. Why is it that people in their 40s and 50s seem to have it harder than the sort of younger children, young adults that have been diagnosed recently? Because in the 60s and 70s, the treatment options were shock therapy. There was very little understanding about what autism was. Most times it was confused with psychosis. The only person that sort of had lived experience is Dr. Temple Guardian, where she created the squeeze machine by the wing and triad of impairments theory, which was talking about social interaction, language and communication and repetitive behavior in a triad. Because there was not enough research, schools had very little understanding, and therefore kids that just learn differently not supported. Diagnosis at that time was at its infancy stage. We were only at version 2 of the diagnosis tool that was used, DSM or the ICD, which was in the late 70s.
If you grew up in the 70s and you had a hard time with autism, it's not surprising. It was a bad time to be autistic. It was seen as a bad thing. You were a bad parent. You were not very smart if you had it. However, childhood affects us for the rest of our life. It's not surprising that there's a lot of people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s now who have a very complicated relationship with autism.
This is just talking about the treatment timelines and reiterating that point that it's what you had to go through because there was not enough understanding. The treatment was quite at its infancy stage. It was probably a huge struggle. Compared to what is available now, if a child is diagnosed with autism, you have many different options and therapies that parents can evaluate and have access to compared to the 70s, which was shock therapy. Other than the lack of diagnosis, lack of knowledge and support that you didn't have growing up, what other influences made you what you are today? Family value system, the time we lived in. Thank you for that. Just going to go back to a quick ecological systems theory, which talks about as a child, your lived experiences are influenced by your microsystem, which is your immediate family. Then all the things you guys talked about, your mesosystem, which is your education, school, exosystem is policy and law at the time that you were growing up. The macrosystem is everything beyond that. Chrono is the time that you lived in. Just to give you a visual about what you guys were saying about the other influences. What age did you get diagnosed or believed you were autistic? Let's get an idea. Celia, thank you for sharing that you were not able to access speech therapy. Well, it's very varied actually. And what was it like before you got diagnosed, especially those who got diagnosed later in adulthood?
That definitely makes more sense. The people who said they were diagnosed at 3 or 4.
A lot of being misunderstood is what you're trying to say. Basically, it was difficult from what you guys are all saying was you guys really struggled, lots of masking and tired due to burnout, the stress to fit in. And just to hear from you again, what made you want a diagnosis to understand yourself better? Chronic fatigue, sensory issues.
Being hereditary, that is a way that a lot of people get picked up. And now, hard to maintain day-to-day jobs, overwhelming sense of anxiety and confusion, understanding myself. Younger people tend to need it for university or school to get support. But as an adult, I think a lot of it comes down to just understanding yourself better, making sense of the way you are. It's great to see that a lot of us are on the same page on this.
Thank you everyone for sharing. These were the common reasons for being diagnosed, is to overcome trauma. I think you guys, a lot of you shared to just understand why you are the way you are, to educate yourself, to get support. And the other one, common one, is my child was recently diagnosed. It's generally the most common reasons. Nat, over to you to share with us some famous autistic adults.
We often look at autism from a youth perspective. Actually, there are a lot of adults who are autistic proud. We've got Temple Grandin. She's a cowgirl based in Colorado. She created a hug machine. It's literally, if you ever go on farms, there's these weird metal contraptions that squeeze cows to keep them calm because cows apparently don't like being milked. And I wonder if that could work for people because there's a calming effect when you're in a plate. She created the squeeze machine or hug machine. And since then, she's gone on to create books, she's done TED Talks, and she shows autism from a unique human perspective. A great autistic role model who is doing better in older life than she was in younger life. She's much more comfortable than she has ever been. Spin that wheel. Melanie Sides. I don't know much about Melanie apart from she's very lovely.
She's a host from today. We picked her because she was one of those people who got diagnosed later as an adult in her mid to late 30s. She did it because she wanted to understand herself better. She was tired of masking, not being able to be herself.
And if any of you know any other people, do put it in the chat because it's always great to know more other autistic role models. Well, they don't necessarily have to be role models, just autistic adults. You know what? I'm going to go with Susan Boyle. Susan Boyle has autism. She won Britain's Got Talent. Her whole life, she wasn't really aware. When she was allowed to perform in an area that she thrived in, she took over the world. She dreamed a dream and she's done amazing. I think Susan is a great example of how you can do what you want in life. I think she still lives in the same house she's lived in her entire life. Yes, she's got a nice haircut now. She's still essentially her, and that has not changed. There is this element of authenticity. You just seem more real, despite people not really always understanding you.
Christine McGuinness is actually the wife of Paddy McGuinness, is the guy that does Top Gear. Interesting, he always thought his wife was autistic, and then he had 3 kids with her, and they were all diagnosed with autism. Then she got diagnosed after that. There's a clip on BBC iPlayer where she talks about her journey if you're interested.
We've got Elon Musk. Yes, he is autistic. He fairly recent. It was on SNL. He said he had Asperger's syndrome, which, as we know, is part of the autistic spectrum. He is a polarizing figure in the autistic community. A quote that I like from Temple, because she is my favorite autistic adult. She says, "If I could snap my fingers and would be non-autistic, I would not. Autism is part of what I am." A lot of you here are here because having autism sucks, particularly if you grew up in the 70s or before, or just it wasn't good to be autistic. It was seen as a negative. Your opinion of it might still be negative. But as you learn to understand how your mind works, as society changes, hopefully you start to see the good that there is. There are some people who believe things like having autism is like having a superpower. I don't like that, because what that's saying is that it's all good. It's all sunshine and rainbows and fighting crime. No, there are challenges. There's also positives, appreciating the highs and the lows. And that's what I like about Temple. She's not saying I'm a person who has autism or lives with autism. She is autistic. It is part of her identity. What the rest of you think. Just having a look. Yeah, screw superpowers. As she says, I find more things made sense rather than being negative. I understand me now. I think it's just really important to know that it's a mixed bag. We all have different experiences, but I agree with you. The older you get, the more you learn, the more things make sense. Some of the biggest difficulties with autism is just not knowing why you're different to others, why the world just doesn't seem like it was created for you. Turns out it wasn't, but not knowing it for a fact can be a really jarring experience. What do you know about autism that you wish you knew sooner? Anything from the science, from yourself, from a personal perspective? Another comment we have is how differently affected women compared to men, especially in the menopause, when my knowledge is at its limits. This was an area I did not know about, and this is why I had to get back up. It needs to be talked more about. I can't be the only one who was surprised that there was a connection. We've got how to prepare for social situations. Yep. There were separate types of it if there were diagnosed before 2013. Okay, you've got Asperger's, you've got classic, we've got, you don't have to be a genius. I'm sick of people saying, the autistic genius gene. No, some of us, maybe 1%, can say the alphabet backwards or standing on one leg with their eyes shut. Autism doesn't equal genius. What it does equal is more of a unique set of skills. Rather than being a generalist, you're more of a specialist. It doesn't mean you have to be the best in the world. We give far too much attention to the autistic superpower when actually autistic people are just like everyone else. You get some really great ones and you get some okay ones. Not everyone in this world is a code breaker. Sensory issues, needing rules, routines. I am allergic to small talk. Being able to talk and share to help with learning ways and to manage better was amazing. Oh, Laurie says, as if I just stood up to say if I could still stand on one leg. I thought everyone could do that. Absolutely. Ashley says, I find more things make sense rather than being negative. I understand me now. These are all nice to see.
I think with the menopause thing, people view it as two different things, not realizing that how it's closely interlinked. Yeah, there's only research coming out about it, and getting the right support is difficult.
We also got why I easily make mistakes with understanding what people mean or what they are asking of me, if that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. I'm continuously misreading people. And I'll tell you, I was diagnosed at 3 with autism, and my life was still difficult because no one told me what autism was. Upsetting, to be honest. When you've got something going on in your body and you can't explain it, it's terrifying. Being diagnosed, 9 times out of 10, it's normally less serious than what you thought it was originally. With autism, it's a release because it isn't a bad thing. It can be a good kind of, I'm okay. Okay, I'm lucky that I'm under a menopause specialist in London. My superpower is being pushy and self-advocating even when I'm exhausted. I think a lot of us have to be self-advocates. Never let a no be a no. Getting support for autism is like mission impossible. There's a term called like autistic mums. They are relentless getting support for their children. But as adults, we might not have that super mum. We have to take that mantle ourselves. It's exhausting, but we have to, unfortunately.
The support available, there's a lot of community groups like Facebook groups and Autistic Mom group on social media. EI provides coaching and mentoring. We do not discriminate by age. The National Autistic Society has some support programs, and they have community-based programs by location. Just check it out as well. Celia saying, I'm still going through the acceptance journey. Because of the limited support, if you know of any support that you have accessed and had a good experience with, can you please share with the rest of us that we can look it up and can be put onto our list?
Yeah. Basically,
Yes. Yeah,
we
sorry.
get told, don't we, all the time that
Mhm.
what support is out there for adults. It's a bit awkward because there isn't really. And it's one reason exceptional individuals exist to support adults rather than children because there just isn't the same amount of support out there. If there is support out there or other organizations which have worked for you, even if they're not directly related to autism, please do share. It's always helped to expand our knowledge. It is really upsetting because this looks perfect for me. Then you realize it's aimed at a completely inappropriate age group. We've got a comment that says, I just finished coaching. We've got alcohol and drugs. It says ironic on the end because unfortunately, people with autism and ADHD are more prone to have bad relationships with alcohol and drugs as a means of softening the world when it is being loud and intense and cope with the struggles that having autism in a non-autistic world can have. Obviously, that's a very damaging way to be. If this is a challenge that you have or having, you're not alone, and it can be contributed to your neurodiversity in some aspects. Family acceptance and understanding. Okay, nice. I mean, we aren't all as lucky to have that, but if you can have your family backing you, then that's priceless. We've got NDSA is a non-profitable organization run by autistic individuals. I'm currently enrolled on an employment support program, which is providing use. I've never heard of that. That sounds really good. I wish there was something like the Autistic Helper app for adults. There are actually a lot of great users as well. But to be honest, we actually haven't had many comments on this slide. I think that speaks volumes for the amount of support that currently is out there. Oh, Celia says Olivia Hops, YouTube female advocate for autism. Great. Okay, yeah, should we go next?
The source of a lot of the new research that's coming out on autism is by Spectrum News. The name of the research is called Bridging the Silos, is the one that I was speaking about with menopause and autism. And obviously, you know our website that you can contact us for support.
Spectrum News is definitely worth checking out if none of you have seen it before. It's all you need to know about autism, like keeping up to date. And for us, obviously, I'd recommend what we do. Know that we're not the only organization that does this type of thing. If you do get in touch with other organizations, great for you. We're definitely under the opinion that we want to work with other organizations. We're not competing with them. Put us in touch with any companies that you think might be relevant, and we can hopefully get the word out there. At the moment, we're UK based. Let's be honest, mainly London. I think there's definitely a need for it worldwide. But let's just say world domination has taken a little bit longer than we would like to have hoped. I definitely see it on the tables.
Yeah, I don't know what it's all. Autistic lady of a different experience with menopause.
There's not enough research and there's not enough data. Generally, the women that the research group that I was talking about that have interviewed have actually said that their symptoms are quite different, and having conversations with a healthcare professional has been difficult. The misunderstanding continues, and most times what happens is the GP just treats you for your symptoms, not looking at it holistically.
Emma had an interesting comment. She says, like many others have realized much about myself following my son's diagnosis. I have not been formally diagnosed. It has helped me to know you're not just lazy, but socially awkward, failing, and to set boundaries and to explain why I have trouble with various things. Thanks for sharing that. Everyone who's been able to share today has been really interesting. Thank you to all of you for attending and for Yosoda for being our special guest today, which I hope you enjoyed seeing a different face. I'm going to end the call now. It's been a pleasure as always. Have a great rest of your week.